Hello everyone, my name is Derek Sinnott. I'm Executive Director of Lean Construction Ireland, and I will be your facilitator today. Firstly, I'd like to welcome you to the Lean Construction Ireland webinar presented by Dan Shakespeare, who's Managing Director of Tactical Edge Consultancy. The title of the webinar is The 5 Critical Measures You Need to Transform Your Project's Productivity. If you have any questions, please type them into the question box and we'll consolidate and ask Dan at the end of the presentation. And if there's any that we don't get to today, we will follow up by email afterwards. The speaker for today is Dan Shakespeare. Dan is a passionate business improvement transformation specialist with vast experience in shaping, managing and deploying technical high performance services across some of Europe's most significant infrastructure projects and complex operational environments. With over 15 years experience in leadership and operational excellence implementation, he began his career in the British Armed Forces, where he had the privilege of learning from great leaders and leading great teams during peace and war operations. I'll now hand over to Dan for his presentation.
Brilliant, thank you, Derek. Good afternoon, everyone on the call. I'm really looking forward to this afternoon to give my presentation. My Wi-Fi has proven to be slightly difficult in the test, so I might dip off camera halfway through. So, Derek, if I'm having some comms issues, please just let me know, and I'll try and do what I can on my end. Let's get straight into it then. So, as Derek said, really truly today I want to go through some of the 5 critical measures really needed to transform construction projects productivity, and I'm going to talk at length really around some of the challenges and difficulties with the construction model, which I think will be well rehearsed and well dressed amongst the community in the room. But then really try to kind of unpack that and say, well, what can we do differently, and understand some of the measures that. And if there's any business leaders and construction leaders in the hall, I really do kind of encourage you guys to take away as much of this as you can. And the idea being is throughout the presentation, we'll give some practical implementation, some steps and some actionable insights that you guys can take away tomorrow to drive the change into your projects and into your businesses. So hopefully everyone enjoys that, enjoys the presentation. Derek give a kind of a brief overview of kind of my background, but I just want to kind of really start from that position about myself starting in the British Army. So I left school at the age of 16. I had little to no GCSEs of which to speak. I had a D in French and a D in cooking, and I didn't really fancy becoming a French chef, so I decided to join the British Army, and really that's where my thirst for operational excellence, for high performance and really leadership really started. And those kind of lean angelists in the room will really start to understand how that kind of links very nicely into my lean journey. So from there, moved into manufacturing, spent several years in production operations in manufacturing, and then moving into the construction industry, where I had the fortune of working on some great programs and some great projects where I was able to test some of the principles and systems and tactics that I'd picked up within my military career and then honed in manufacturing, and start to transfer them into design and construction environments. So hopefully coming from a position of authority in terms of being able to drive some key messages home today. Okay, so the productivity imperative. So I think fundamentally there's 2 key points here I want to raise, but really there has been many trees felled in the authoring and drafting of literature that expels the virtues and challenges within the construction industry, ranging from the Mark Farmer report, the construction McKinsey productivity imperative, right the way to in the early 90s with Sir John Egan talking about rethinking construction. So there's been lots of literature out there that highlights the productivity challenge, but I'm sure you guys will be familiar with the graphic on the left hand side. But fundamentally, it shows the UK economy only saw a 12% increase in gross domestic value add, or gross value add, from the construction industry in the last 22 years up until 2019. So that works out around less than 0.5% a year, which compared to the wider UK economy, saw a 53% increase in that time, more than 2% a year. So that statistic in and of itself tells you that for every pound spent in construction, compared to other industries, manufacturing being one of those, there's significantly less value or gross value add provided for the taxpayers and for the assets themselves. And again, it highlights the challenge that's been grossly impacted into the industry for years. Coupled with that, and I think it's really poignant given the timing of this webinar. So in the latest 2021 account of the top 100 contractors in the UK, contractors make around on average 2.6% net operating margin, and that's again viewed against the backdrop of regular. So the construction industry has the highest number of insolvencies out of any industry. Coupled with that, some really high-profile administrations, and I literally Googled to put some graphics in there. Construction industry insolvencies, and I had reams and reams of Google news clips, news articles to be able to pick from. But I picked two in particular within the last 12 months of two really high profile organizations. ISG, turnover of over 2.2 billion, has recently gone bust, and that's really impacting the hearts and the lives and the livelihoods of people who've been working for that great organization for many years. So the impact of poor productivity and low sustainability in terms of net operating margin really does have an impact on real people's lives. So ISG and NMCM being two prime examples of big firms, big household names going bust in the last 12 months. So a really famous economist, a chap called Paul Krugman, once said, productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. And I want everyone to really think about that. So my organization and a few peers of mine conducted a really kind of short and kind of grassroots survey, getting some thoughts and feelings of industry leaders and local level leadership. So we interviewed everyone from quality managers to shop floor supervisors, construction managers and construction leaders to talk to them about productivity, and we had some really interesting insight that come off the back of that. So we found, actually, generally speaking, that there was a gross misconception about actually what were the drivers behind productivity and what productivity actually meant. And we asked a number of stakeholders to answer some fairly rudimentary kind of exam questions in terms of how to define productivity, how to define the input and output measures of productivity, and really sweeping statements across the board in terms of the misalignment and misunderstanding of the concept of productivity, really getting that muddled up with schedule, muddled up with cost, muddled up with production. And so there was a really kind of gross misunderstanding of that concept. And I think that really speaks to the heart of this issue, really. So some insights from some major programs then. So these have come from various sources, and I'll cite these in the slides when I share these afterwards. But poor communication and misaligned goals between stakeholders really contribute to rework and delays, with 30% of project cost tied up in rework and errors. Construction workers in particular, spending 50% of their time, or less than 50% of the time, on direct construction activities. So the actual value-adding activities that change the fit, form, and function of the product or asset that we're trying to create. Less than 50% of their time is actually spent doing those activities. Some really valuable insight from the Geary Institute. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. It's called the Get It Right Initiative. Highlights that £21 billion annually are contributed towards avoidable errors, rework, scrap, and snagging, all those types of things, which actually contributes to 21% of the total project value within within the annual UK construction sector. And then finally then, so I'm currently working on Hinkley Point C, which is a large new nuclear build program in Somerset. A huge global project. So these statistics really ring true to myself personally, but large construction projects typically take 20% longer to complete than scheduled, and are typically over 80% over budget. 9 out of 10 mega projects experience cost overruns with an average cost overrun of 39%. So some really kind of non-avoidable errors, the amount of value-adding time spent, or sort of the amount of time not spent doing value-adding activities, rework costs. Bear with me, I'm going to turn my webcam off because I'm just getting some feedback there. Derek, have you still got me, mate, there? Just double checking my comms are still okay.
Yeah, the comms are better now, and it's good that you turned off the camera. Just broke up a little bit there.
Okay, good stuff. So yeah, so these, some couple of these statistics here with the really razor thin margins, it really highlights the case for change. So again, one of my favorite authors, Stephen Covey, was the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, once said that success comes from the ability to view each arising problem as an opportunity for improvement. So I want to unpack that statement a little bit more in terms of, well, how do we view opportunities? How do we find problems? And really, this is the crux of the session today, is actually, so we see there's a structural and systemic problem within the industry, and if we see problems as opportunities for improvement, then how do we learn to see? So how do we start to see the problems and use the passion, energy, enthusiasm from industry leaders and from those people who build large scale, small scale construction projects? How do we enable and empower that human capital to be able to see problems and then begin to be able to solve them? So these 5 measures of construction productivity were born out the back of industry research, but then coupled together with my organization's research and findings to come together with 5 core productivity measures. And I'm going to go through these in a little bit of detail. Okay, so step number 1, the efficiency of human capital. So what do we mean by the efficiency of human capital? So then we need to really measure on all of our construction projects the proportion of time spent doing productive or value-adding work. So at the moment, it's incredibly difficult to measure that. It's very, very incredibly difficult to measure that, but also as well underpinning the fact that it's difficult to measure. It's also quite an emotive thing to measure, but really until we get to the bottom of pinning those measures down and understanding the amount of downtime, typically in manufacturing we would measure that as downtime. So of an 8-hour shift, how many hours of that shift were we making work making product, and the rest of the time what was that downtime related to? We need to start to drive that as leaders of the industry. We need to start driving that as a measure of what is our downtime, because if we can start to see the downtime, it then gives us a ability to be able to start to measure and improve that. So the efficiency of human capital measured by the proportion of time spent doing productive work, or ultimately the amount of downtime. And then if we look at the amount of downtime as a percentage of the amount of time spent doing that work, gives us that percentage ratio, gives that number as a percentage. So then the second thing then, so this is the efficiency of production. So this is different to production rates. It's different to PPC. This is a blended measure looking at the efficiency or rate at which an asset is being constructed against the capital cost or man hours required to be able to put that into place. So often what I find with organizations, they may measure production in terms of volume or quants. So whether you're on a piping project, they might say, the amount of pipe that we put in, or we might measure the amount of, if we're doing a reinforced concrete project, you might measure the amount of rebar that we got in in the day or in the week, or the amount of concrete that we poured within the, whatever the unit of measure is. That's typically how that's communicated, but we don't necessarily understand the efficiency in which that went in. So we want to start to tie that production to capital cost or man-hour cost, so we can start to understand the efficiency or the rate of the efficiency in which that went in, so we can start to measure that in terms of asset production per hour or per pound. So it cost us, I'm going to make these figures up off the top of my head, it cost us £10 for every 1 ton of rebar. I wish that was the case, but for example, it cost us X number of pound for the X weight or asset grouping per week or per day. So it starts to give us a flavour of the productivity of our production. Again, so starting to think about that in terms of core metrics and bringing that rounded approach. Third one then is the cost of rework, defects and poor quality. So again, this is typically, in housing projects, a really good example. So you might measure the time take to do the snagging at the end. So you might do the final inspection, and then it might, we might pick up 2 hours worth of snagging, or we might pick up half a day's worth of snagging at a cost of X. So we can start to measure that cost of rework, but that's not looking at the downstream impacts of that. That's not upstream impacts of that. It's not actually considering actually to get to the point of final inspection, we've had to rework it several times to get there. And again, the perception, behavior and mindset typically within construction organizations is that it's part of the course, it is what it is. Rework is part of the work, and we need to fundamentally shift that mindset in terms of, we want to have zero defects, zero accidents, zero defects mindset. And actually any rework is a deviation from standards. And again, we need to, similar to the efficiency of human capital, we need to capture that rework. We need to capture that as a tally, capture it as a percentage, capture it of whatever mechanisms we can use. We need to capture that, because if we can capture it, if we can measure it, we can see it. If we can see it, then we can start to improve it. So it's really important. The cost of rework, defects and poor quality is really important, not just the back end inspection stuff, but in build. So in manufacturing, we call this built-in quality, inline quality checking, and the steps at which that's being produced. Are we building quality into the process? Finally then, pre-manufactured value. So again, fairly simple measure. Really, this is probably the simplest of all of them of which to measure. One of the simplest is the proportion of a building work that's being either manufactured off-site, pre-assembled, on-site, or constructed and then brought in as modular units away from site. So really we want to look at that as a raw percentage. So I'll give you some statistics on Hinkley Point C. So at the start of the year, our pre-manufactured value was circa 22%. And within 6 months, we've been able to get that to 35%, which has given us some huge program, huge cost savings. And then the ambition is to drive that forward. But until we were measuring it, we had absolutely no idea. It was a best guess. So we measured it. We realized where the challenge were. We then looked at the small low-hanging fruit, which we've now attacked. And now it's about finding those other gains. But fundamentally started from measuring it, so that it has to be ingrained within your business as part of your balanced scorecard, the pre-manufactured value, and look to slowly over time increase that. And then similar to the rework piece is the amount of scrap, waste and excess inventory. So one of the biggest bugbear phrases I have in the industry is I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it. And with all of that language and mindset comes the acceptance of waste and the acceptance of the reluctance to move to just-in-time. So with just-in-time production, we have the right material in the right place at the right time, just-in-time, and by measuring the amount of scrap, waste and excess inventory that we have, it moves us into a better position to move to effective pull systems, effective just-in-time systems, where we can start to reduce that waste. Because not only does it reduce capital cost, but it also improves safety because there's less chance of rubbish, less chance of materials being left, to dropped object risks. It reduces the amount of time, management time in ordering and all that type of stuff, and it improves logistics and flow on site as well. So again, a really, really critical measure. So those are the 5 measures. Again, I'll share these afterwards, and I'm more than happy to talk out with this session in those in a little bit more detail. But I'm going to talk now about so those are the measures. Those are great, but actually, fundamentally, how do we start to know if we're going in the right direction at the right time, and what principles and operating systems do we need to have in place to make these measures make a tangible impact and actually turn the dial of our major programs and of our construction businesses. So first and foremost, those measures were a blend, but mostly were lagging indicators. So for, I don't want to necessarily insult anyone's intelligence on the call, but I'm going to just quickly go through the difference between a leading and lagging indicator, and why it's really important as businesses do these things and bring together principles and strategies that drive transformational change. It's important to have a blended scorecard that enable us to drive this change. So leading and lagging indicators. So think lagging indicator is typically output orientated. They're really easy to measure, but they're hard to influence or improve. So that it's kind of telling you the story after the fact. So, you know, looking at the schedule at the end of the month, did we achieve our milestone? Yes or no? You know, by that time, it's almost too late to influence things. Whereas leading measures are typically input orientated and often hard to measure, but they're more easy to influence. And I'll give an example. So think about losing weight. So if I wanted to lose a weight, let's just say I was going on, you know, I can't fit into my favorite jeans anymore, so I kind of have a hard old kind of conversation with myself. I'm saying, okay, Dan, you need to pull your finger out and lose a little bit of weight. So that set myself a goal, a target of losing weight. So the dial I want to turn, the key performance indicator that I actually want to turn, is what the scales say. That's the dial I want to turn. But if I just go to the scales at the end of every week, stand on the scales, and, you know, I've tried my best and I've done the things I thought were right, and I stand on the scales at the end of the week, I'm either going to have lost weight or not lost weight. There's no way in which I can influence that key performance indicator once I've stepped on the scales. It's too late by then. But actually, we want to think about looking at the leading indicators to success. So think about the losing weight example. So what I might do is bring some supplementary KPIs in. So I might measure the number of steps that I do on a daily basis. I might measure the number of calories that I intake within the daily basis. And I might measure the number of times I go to the gym within the week. So if I bring those 3 measures in and I measure those accurately and get the right systems in place to be able to do that, if I'm green across all those leading key performance indicators, when I step on the scales at the end of the week, I'll know I'll have a much better chance of achieving my green condition on the dial I actually want to turn. And if I haven't changed the dial, I haven't maybe I wanted to lose £1 a week and I've only lost half a pound, then I can go back to those leading indicators and say, do we need to ramp those up a little bit more? Do we need to make those maybe stretch indicators to give us more chance of achieving our target objectives? Whereas if I didn't have those leading indicators, I step on the scale at the end of the week and I might say, oh, well, I'm going to do 1 more dance class, or I'm going to, I'd be guessing where I need to do these improvements. It's really, really important as we start to move into the next phase of this presentation that we think about the right leading and lagging indicators used to drive our businesses forward. So how do we start to balance the scales then? So we know the inputs. We know that we're starting to think about the inputs that we need to drive the output. So time, cost, quality, delivery, production, productivity, leading, lagging indicators. We kind of get a bit of a feel. We tie them back to our core values. So we kind of know what we want to do. So how do we actually, what are the ways in which we can implement this change at a micro level, at a project level, but also as well at a strategic and a business level as well. So first and foremost, I want you to think principles, systems, then tactics. So the principles I want everyone to start to think about is the principles of visual performance management. So we want to turn our workplace into a showcase, into a lighthouse, so that it can be easily understood by anyone at a glance, status at a glance. It means that in terms of quality, our defects immediately apparent. In terms of quantity, it means that our delay or planned performance, again, is immediately apparent. Because when problems are immediately apparent and they can be discovered immediately, it means as a team, we can all initiate those improvement plans. So we make performance visual and transparent, so we understand status at a glance, in order to initiate, also in order that everyone can initiate improvement plans. So those are the principles that we want to follow. So how do we do that then? So there's a system that underpins visual performance management, where we start to create hierarchical streams of control that allow us to transfer accountability and transfer responsibility and accountability, but not the responsibility, right the way down to the teams, to the people that are doing the work. So first and foremost, we want to start at this kind of strategic level here. We might start at the leadership level, and this is where we start to understand our balanced scorecard. We want to set the strategic measures that we know are going to drive the business forward. So we might do this in a Hoshin cannery. So again, another fantastic lean philosophy, lean tool set. But again, creating a balanced scorecard through Hoshin strategic direction, and set that strategic vision through an effective dashboard, through an effective balanced scorecard. Once we've done that, then we want to then create physical or digital systems through our hierarchies of control, from leadership level through to our functional level, into the level 3, or the team level. So these are, down here is your PMs. It's your PMs, it's your engineers, it's your black hats, construction managers, it's your blue hat supervisors, it's the guys who actually do the work. It's all of those guys with a strategically aligned set of cascaded objectives and planning. So again, using the last planner discipline, you can also follow this approach. So this might be kind of milestone level planning. So think of a large scale infrastructure program where you have to create interface milestones, do strategic planning at a top level, and then you might then move down to kind of a regional level planning, and then down to kind of local level planning as well. So you can follow the last planner discipline within this structure as well. So we want to ultimately create tiers or levels of control that move the accountability and ownership through the business, through an aligned set of key performance indicators and dashboards that allow us to drive the business forward. So once we've cascaded them down, we then execute the work through daily control, so daily production control, last planner, and huddles. So daily huddles, looking at our key performance indicators, looking at did we or did we not have a good day against our performance indicators, and then using other tool sets like 3Cs or action tracking, accountability, commitment-based planning to drive accountability and daily control, but also as well provide the opportunity for escalation. So this is where we are trying to pass down the ability to do local level problem solving, but also well, when we can't solve those problems or we need to escalate appropriately, we then transfer effectively the warnings through the business in terms of those issues, so we can deal with problems quickly at the right level of the organization. And then that circle goes on. So tiered visual performance management is really one of the underpinning strategies of high performing organizations. They may not call it tiered visual performance management, they may not have it wholly designed in the exact quantum and the exact structure that typical lean businesses, so the total production system being a prime example, they might not design it in the exact way, but fundamentally it's based on the right principles and the right execution system to be able to drive high performance within the business. So that's how we move from strategic, the 5 critical measures of productivity. Okay, that's great. What do we do? Actually, the people who make a difference are these guys here. These are the ones that when the rubber hits the road, they smarten our streets, they deliver fantastic, visually appeasing, cultural and social value-adding assets that transform our landscape. Those are the guys and girls that do that work. And fundamentally, us as leaders need to be able to create systems around them to give them the best opportunity to succeed within a demanding environment. So I've pulled together a really simple kind of 5-stage implementation process for you guys to think about and take away. So firstly, we want to talk about understanding our current state. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Organizations are probably doing something like this, or there's maybe some similar systems in place. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Understand the organization's current performance management structure, but fundamentally start with engaging the guys from the bottom and setting that strategic vision and balance scorecard through Hoshin Kanri policy deployment, ideally, to set that direction. Then start to design the architecture, so create a customized. So really, it's important, it has to be customized to the business, to the operating environment. You can't just lift and shift from different operating environments. We have to design customized visual management architecture, and then the performance drumbeat that underpins each layer of that organization or that hierarchical structure. We then set a pilot. So you want to test what's known as a vertical slice. You want to test the system on a smaller scale as part of a vertical slice to understand the system design. So what would that vertical slice look like? So you would effectively test it like that. So that would be, in this example, this portion here would be a vertical slice within that environment. So you test and adjust there, again using the PDCA model. So you plan the pilot, you do the pilot, you check, did it to have the desired results? Did we see positive improvement to key performance indicators, team morale, safety, quality, cost, delivery, and time within this pilot slice? And then you may have to test and adjust the system. And then once you've done that, you act. And then the idea being is you then roll the rest of it out within the rest of the organization or within the rest of the project, whatever the size and scope of that system is. Once we've done that, so we've done step number 1, we've done step number 2, we've now piloted it. So we piloted it, we tested it, we're now going to move to mass deployment. So again, this is starting to think about really transformational change now. I'm thinking about business change models like Kotter's model is a really good example of how to build sustainable change and how to drive change within organizations at a macro and a micro level. And then finally, then it's all about the sustain. So if anyone is familiar with 5S and the challenges around 5S, the sustainment part is really, really important. And that's where leaders really come to the forefront. And there's techniques like process confirmation, Goluxi, Genshi Genbutsu, all of those really core Toyota production system principles, getting down to the shop floor and really understanding those challenges and being there for your team, and also celebrating success is really important when we start to see the dial turn. So in terms of some takeaways I want you to think about then. So fundamentally, without sounding grandiose or trying to make clickbait statements, the current model of construction is flawed. I did initially, in my initial version, I did say broken, but I thought I didn't want to necessarily upset anyone. But really and truly, the data tells us that the current model of construction is flawed, and we start to lean on models like Lean IPD, Project 13 in the UK, in terms of models of construction that are more conducive to creating environments for operational excellence and high performance. What gets measured get improved. So if you want to improve something, you have to measure it. If you're not improving it, you're not measuring it, you're just guessing, basically. Something I mentioned actually during the presentation. So the 3 reasons why most change initiatives fails. So the first reason is poor leadership. The second reason is poor leadership. And the third and final reason why change initiatives fail is poor leadership. So hopefully that hammers home the message of leaders are really vital in driving transformational change. Often lean communities I find get hung up on the tools and hung up on the physical artifacts, so the visual boards, the 3 C's model, the 5S model, whatever it is, the actual tactics. But fundamentally, we need to think principles first, then build systems that underpin the principles, and then we move to the tactics, the tools and techniques, the tactics that drive transformational change. So in order to get, that's one of the reasons why I've called my business the tactical edge, is because actually to get the tactical edge, to get that edge on your competitors, to get that really transformational change, we have to think principles first, embed principles of high performance, then create wrap operating systems around them, embedded and underpinned by strong leadership. Then the tools and tactics are actually the easy part. And with this, build, measure, learn. So don't go, if you're going to do this, don't jump out of bed one day and say, I'm going to transform the organization and build a tiered visual performance management system across our global operations, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy to do that. Build small, measure, learn, improve, build them on a local level, control what you can control. If you're a PM on this project and you're thinking, you know what, I can't control what happens at an organization level, I can't control what happens at a corporate level, but actually what I can control is I can control my site. I can control the team in which I can deliver change and be influential within the environment you can do, and use that as the bedrock for change, and start to bring others with you, generate the pull based on the transformational change you're driving at a local level. So don't get hung up on the fact that you might not be able to change the world, but you can change your world and change the world around you. Okay, so that's me done waffling. I hope you've kind of enjoyed that presentation, got something useful out of it. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and hopefully that works, and then pass over to Derek for any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Very informative. Getting into a lot of different concepts and details there. I would encourage anybody, if they have any questions, keep them coming. I suppose, first of all, Dan, you're still sharing there at the moment, is just to, I suppose, really understand, or maybe delve a little bit deeper into some of the concepts, and where in the project life cycle would you tend to see most benefit, particularly, in terms of the leadership, cascading down to the execution piece? How do you see that would benefit?
Yeah, 100%. So, yeah. So if you think about it, in anything, the best time to influence changes is right at the start. So think of, really innovative infrastructure program delivery models like Lean IPD. Really, although not explicitly, implicitly, a lot of the principles and particularly the frameworks around IPD underpin some of the principles of tiered visual performance management, and some of the disciplines like creating a balanced scorecard for Hoshin Kanri, etc. So the ability to influence early is obviously preferential, but I'll give an example of the program that I'm on. So working on Hinkley Point C project that's been in construction now for coming up to kind of 8 years or so, and really entrenched in terms of the operating system and some of the ways of working. But we've been able to embed in the last 18 months a style of TVPM. It's not the entire end-to-end model, but we've been able to, like I said, we've set the principles, we've set the foundations, and then we've created the system that works for the operating environment, and then brought in some tools. So we don't have a 3-tiered system, we have a kind of a 2-tiered system, which brings its own challenges. But again, we've been able to influence change significantly, despite not it looking like the perfect model on paper. And I think we've got to recognize that as, don't let great be the enemy of good, because actually the change that we made in the main civil works program and productivity on Hinkley Point C in the last 12 to 18 months has been astounding. So we've improved productivity, so actual productivity, not whatever else they were measuring before we came. We've been able to improve that by 21% in 18 months, which is incredible. We've been able to hit milestones and programs that has never been done in main civil works across the time that we've been on the program. And again, I'm not blowing smoke up my own arse, and that's not just me. It's an entire team. It's an entire people and supply chain, entire organization of being able to drive that transformational change. But again, through solid leadership, because we bought in at that strategic level. So hopefully that answers your question. So obviously not ideal. So you can't ideally start, build it into the enterprise, build it into the way of working, set that balanced scorecard right from the start. But you can start midway through a project and just start with a kind of an annual cycle, so an annual planning, annual strategy session, and then build the system that cascades effectively from there.
Okay, and thanks for that. Ocean cannery, some people are unfamiliar with the term and what it is. Can you just go into a little bit of detail?
Yeah. I can do. So that's ocean cannery is an entire concept in and of itself. But ocean cannery is a TPS concept, a total production system concept, and that means strategic planning or strategic alignment. And what that means is the ability to be able to create an effective balanced scorecard through what's called an X matrix. So you have a balanced scorecard and an X matrix, which is effectively the strategy, the dashboard, the cockpit that sets the direction and the journey for the organization for that 5-year, 3-year, and 1-year period. So it's a way in which you can do annual planning. You then set that rhythm through monthly what's called a catchable process. But you do strategy deployment because you can then cascade that through the business. So really good. I'll give you a quick story. So when the US tried to get a man on the moon, so John F. Kennedy in the late 60s, and there was a race to the moon. John F. Kennedy visited the shuttle center in America, and went to see the products. It went to see the rocket ship and was speaking to all of the senior leaders, the top engineers, the top scientists, all those guys. And then spoke to a janitor. So the janitor was sweeping the floor of the hangar. He said, "What are you doing, son? What's your role?" And the guy said, "I'm here to get a man on the moon." I said, well, how do you, as a janitor, how do you get a man on the moon? How are you doing your role here? How are you getting a man on the moon? And he said, "Well, actually, it's really important that I sweep all of the debris, all of the dust away from this hangar, because this environment has to be to a really high specification of cleanliness. There can't be any debris, any dust, any contaminants that move into the rocket, because if there's a contaminant that moves into the rocket ship, there's a chance that might impact in-flight mechanics, and there could be a serious malfunction." So I see my role of getting a man on the moon is it's really important that I make sure this environment is squeaky clean and achieving the standards that we need to do in order to play my part within the business. And that's a really good example of the benefits and how ocean cannery translates from just being KPIs and death by KPIs. And we've been on this. Hinkley's a great example of death by KPIs in a lot of ways, but actually fundamentally, it's about those who change the fit, form, and function, be having the ability and operating system to be able to buy into and engage in your mission, your values, your principles, your objectives through the translation of effective key performance indicators, so they can achieve the end mission. So that's what Hoshin Kanri is in a 3-minute answer, but it's a little bit more complex. I'm more than happy to be invited back to do a presentation on Hoshin Kanri if you wish.
Thanks for that. The whole idea of this, and even say measuring the cost of rework or measuring the cost of poor quality and so on, it takes time and it takes an input, or deploying any of these tools, techniques, philosophies, etc. Who pays for it?
Who pays for it? So again, goes back to the model of construction being fundamentally flawed. So if you look at the worst possible type of contractual model, let's just say cost plus. So with cost plus, there's little to no appetite for contractors to invest in creating transformational operating models that will improve production, productivity, cost, quality, because they're on cost plus, so they get paid. They get the margin regardless. So again, that's a really obtruse way of putting it. I'm just using it to try and make a statement. So within those operating environments, and that's a contractual model that I'm currently working within. Fundamentally, it's a client that foots the bill for that, but with the long-term intention that actually, if we can get really good buy-in and transformational change within that setting, it effectively pays for itself. That's fundamentally what it does. But again, this is really about engaging people to do the right thing. So the way I've done it is I engage with black hats, blue hats, construction managers, project leaders and directors every single day about doing this stuff and doing these daily disciplines will make your life easier. It gives us a safer environment for the guys to go to work. It gives us less stress, less burden, less heartache. So if we do this, we can really make that change. And that's how I've been able to generate it within this contractual operating environment, has been able to actually people to look, so the contractor or the supplier of the asset, to look beyond the facade and look at the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then from a client perspective, effectively saying this stuff pays for itself, which it does. But then the transverse to that environment is we build contractual arrangements and enterprise relationships that mutually incentivize and mutually create the right operating environment, underpinned by the right, I talked about principles earlier on, create the right culture underpinned by the right principles, systems, and then tactics. So then there's a win-win environment. And this system, which is why I often call it a win-win operating system, because actually there's a win-win. If implemented effectively, it's a win-win situation for everyone.
I suppose the follow-on or almost universal question then is, Dan, or the question that's out there, why is this not been universally deployed, or why are we not seeing it absolutely everywhere?
Good question. I think if I'm honest, I think there's a lack of knowledge is maybe a little bit harsh. I think some of these approaches are well versed within mature operating environments. So I've worked with big organizations like Airbus, with Alstom, in the military as well, in my days in defence. So these really mature, high-performing organisations, again, either explicitly or implicitly build this into the fabric of their organisation and have the right principles, systems, and tactics to be able to embed that. I think, generally speaking, within the construction industry, there's maybe a hesitancy to learn from those other environments, or almost that the default action is to say, well, that's construction, or sorry, that's production, or that's the military, or that's rail, or that's that industry, and that only works in that environment, and we're construction and we're different. But fundamentally we're not. We're fundamentally organizations with a purpose, with people, and with processes that are there to deliver extraordinary performance, to deliver significant outcomes. So whether you're building cars or building houses, fundamentally the right ingredients are there, and it really comes to the bravery and courage of leaders and thought leaders within the industry, and the early adopters to take that leap of faith. It's almost like jumping out of, let's just jump out of the airplane and build the parachute as we fall type environment.
Okay, thanks very much. That brings us to the end. Sincere thanks again to Dan for today's webinar presentation. Please note that a copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. If anybody wants to record some CPD, you can contact us directly and we'll send out a certificate in relation to attendance. Information will be sent out shortly in relation to the next webinar in October. For information on this and other webinars, the annual conference, our annual book of case studies and other resources, please visit the website at leanconstructionireland.ie and follow the Lean Construction Ireland LinkedIn group page. Finally, thanks again to everybody who attended today. We very much look forward to meeting you in the future at LCI events and webinars. Thank you.